Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hacker News Daily podcast. I'm your host, and today we're diving into yesterday's top stories from the front page of the internet's tech water cooler. We reviewed 30 stories that made waves on Hacker News yesterday, and I've picked the 5 that really captured the community's attention. We're talking thousands of points and hundreds of passionate comments. Today's lineup is a fascinating mix that really captures the zeitgeist of our industry right now. We've got Microsoft potentially ruining GitHub with their AI obsession, developers abandoning fancy productivity apps for plain text files, the UK government somehow managing to threaten Wikipedia of all things, and a controversial take on going all in with AI coding assistants that has security professionals reaching for their pitchforks. It's one of those days where you can really feel the tension between progress and preservation, between moving fast and not breaking things that actually work. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's see what had everyone talking yesterday. All right, now we're diving into something that's got the developer community pretty fired up. GitHub is no longer independent at Microsoft after their CEO resignation. And wow, the Hacker News crowd has some thoughts on this one. Over 1,000 points and almost 750 comments. Clearly, this struck a nerve. So here's what happened. GitHub CEO stepped down and Microsoft immediately folded GitHub into their core AI division. Not DevDiv, where you'd expect developer tools to live, but core AI. And that little organizational detail, that's what's got everyone spooked. You know, it's fascinating because when Microsoft first acquired GitHub back in 2018, a lot of us were genuinely surprised by how hands-off they were. They actually made things better. We got GitHub Actions, which honestly is a pretty solid CI/CD system. They made private repos free for everyone. It felt like maybe, just maybe, this was the new Microsoft everyone kept talking about, the Satya Nadella era of actually caring about developers. But now, well, the honeymoon's definitely over. The community's seeing this reorganization as Microsoft basically saying, forget being a great platform for developers, you're an AI data mine now. And honestly, can you blame them for being cynical?
One commenter made this really sharp observation. They said Microsoft is following this pattern where they're sacrificing perfectly good, established products on the altar of AI hype. And the kicker is, the AI stuff they're producing isn't even that revolutionary. It's like watching someone renovate a perfectly functional kitchen because smart fridges are trendy, except the smart fridge they install keeps suggesting you eat ice cream for breakfast. The discussion got pretty heated around whether this is Microsoft reverting to their old monopolistic ways. Several people pointed out this cycle we've seen with tech giants. IBM did it, Apple's done it, and now Microsoft's doing it again. There's this period where they're open and developer-friendly, usually when they're playing catch-up, and then once they're comfortable again, bam, back to the walled garden. What really struck me, though, was this sense of resignation. Like, developers have seen this movie before. They know how it ends. GitHub will slowly shift focus from what developers actually want, better code review tools, performance improvements, boring but essential stuff, to whatever serves Microsoft's AI ambitions. More Copilot integration whether you want it or not, your code becoming training data, features nobody asked for while long-standing issues gather dust in the backlog. Now, to be fair, there were some voices of reason in the discussion. A few folks pointed out that GitHub under Microsoft has actually been pretty good so far. Copilot in VS Code, actually quite useful once you get used to it. And someone made the practical point that GitHub was always going to end up integrated somewhere in Microsoft's structure. At least Core AI has budget and influence. But here's what really gets me about this whole situation. Microsoft had successfully rehabilitated their image with developers. They'd gone from the embrace, extend, extinguish company to the we love open source company. GitHub was like the crown jewel of that transformation. And now they're basically announcing, yeah, that was nice while it lasted, but have you heard about AI? The timing is particularly tone-deaf. We're in this moment where there's already AI fatigue setting in. Developers are tired of every tool, every platform, every service trying to shove AI features down their throats. And Microsoft's response is to take one of the last relatively AI-free zones in their ecosystem and say, you know what this needs? More AI.
I think what's really concerning here isn't just about GitHub. It's about what this signals for the broader tech industry. When even Microsoft, a company that seemed to have learned from its past mistakes, can't resist the siren call of AI everything, what hope is there for smaller platforms? We're watching in real time as practical, user-focused product development gets replaced by whatever this is. The community consensus seems to be, enjoy GitHub while it still resembles the platform you know, because change is coming whether developers want it or not. And maybe start looking at those GitLab installation guides again, just in case. Speaking of developers getting frustrated with overcomplicated tools that miss the point, our next story really struck a chord with me personally. It's called I Tried Every To-Do App and Ended Up with a .txt file. And it's sitting at a whopping 873 points with over 500 comments, which tells you this hit a nerve in the community. You know what's funny? I bet half of you listening just had a moment of recognition there, because this author's journey, it's basically the productivity app version of that old saying about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. They went through Notion, Todoist, Things 3, probably dropped hundreds of dollars on subscriptions, spent countless hours setting up the perfect system, and where they end up? A plain text file, just a .txt file sitting on their computer. The author makes this really compelling case about what they call the productivity app trap. And honestly, they're not wrong. They talk about spending 3 weeks perfecting their Notion setup, building databases, creating relations, setting up templates, making it all beautiful and interconnected. And then they used it for exactly 2 days before abandoning it. That's gotta sting, right? But here's where it gets even better. With Todoist, they actually started gaming the system. They'd add drink water as a task and complete it 8 times a day just to rack up those sweet productivity points. I mean, at that point, you're not being productive, you're just playing a really boring video game. What really resonates here is the author's realization that setting up these complex systems feels like work. You're typing, you're thinking, you're organizing, but you're not actually doing the things you need to do. It's procrastination dressed up in productivity clothing. And that's a hard pill to swallow for those of us who spent weekends crafting the perfect GTD implementation in whatever app is trending. Now, the text file solution they landed on, it's almost aggressively simple. No formatting, no tags, no projects or contexts or priority levels, just lines of text. Need to mark something done? Delete it, or put an X in front. Want to search? Control F. Need version control? Git's got your back. Want to access it from anywhere? It's a text file. Literally every device since the 1970s can open it. No company is going to go under and take your to-do list with them. No subscription's going to expire and lock you out of your own tasks. But here's where the Hacker News discussion gets really interesting and a bit ironic. You've got all these people agreeing that simple text files are the way to go, and then in the same breath, they're describing their elaborate setups. Oh yeah, I just use a text file with a custom Python script that parses it every morning, and a cron job that emails me reminders, and an LLM that categorizes tasks, and 17 Vim plugins to manage it. Like, at what point does your simple text file system become more complex than just using Todoist? There's this fascinating middle ground that emerged in the comments around Emacs and org mode. For those who don't know, org mode is basically what happens when text files go to grad school. It's still plain text, so you get all those benefits, no vendor lock-in, works everywhere, version control friendly, but it adds just enough structure to handle more complex workflows. You can have headings, deadlines, recurring tasks, even time tracking, all while staying in the text file world. One commenter described it as having your cake and eating it too. And honestly, that's not a bad description. But then you've got folks like Don Nofeld in the comments who are basically saying, y'all are cute with your text files, but I'm managing 100+ tasks daily across family stuff, investments, legal matters, multiple businesses.
Their argument is that once you hit a certain complexity threshold, a text file just can't cut it. You need the search, the filters, the context, the ability to defer tasks to specific dates, recurring tasks that actually recur without manual intervention. And you know what? They're not wrong either. The mobile situation is where text files really show their age. Sure, you can sync them with Dropbox or Git, but editing a text file on your phone while you're standing in line at the grocery store, that's not a great experience. Several commenters mentioned this as the deal breaker that sent them back to dedicated apps, although others countered that if you need to add a to-do while grocery shopping, maybe you're overthinking things.
There's even this radical faction, and I kind of love this, led by a commenter named Jader201, who argues for using nothing, no system at all. Their philosophy? If something's actually important, you'll remember it. If you forget it, it probably wasn't that important. They make exceptions for calendar appointments and maybe the occasional reminder, but otherwise they're running their entire life on wetware. That's either enlightened or terrifying, depending on your perspective. What strikes me about this whole discussion is that we're all trying to solve the same fundamental problem. How do we keep track of what we need to do without the system itself becoming another thing we need to do? And there's no universal answer because we all have different thresholds for complexity, different workflows, different brains even. The author's journey from complex apps back to text files isn't really about text files being objectively better. It's about finding that sweet spot where your system is just complex enough to handle your needs, but simple enough that maintaining it doesn't become a job in itself. For some people, that's a .txt file. For others, it's org mode. For others still, it's Things3 or Notion or whatever. The real wisdom here isn't use text files. It's stop chasing the perfect system and stick with something that works well enough. Though I gotta say, after reading this, I did check my Notion workspace and, yeah, I haven't opened it in 3 months, so maybe there's something to this text file thing after all. You know, this theme of simple things that work being threatened by overcomplicated solutions doesn't just apply to our personal productivity tools. Sometimes it happens to entire platforms that millions of people rely on. All right, switching gears here to something that's got the Hacker News community really fired up. Wikipedia has just lost a legal challenge against the UK's Online Safety Act, and the implications are honestly pretty wild. So here's what's happening. The UK government has this Online Safety Act that was supposedly designed to rein in the big social media companies, right? Facebook, Twitter, the usual suspects. But somehow Wikipedia, yes, the encyclopedia we all rely on, has gotten caught in the same net. The Wikimedia Foundation went to court trying to fight this, and the High Court basically said, nope, the rules applied to you too. Now, what makes this particularly absurd is what these Category 1 rules would require. Wikipedia would need to verify the identities of all its volunteer editors, every single one. Think about that for a second. Wikipedia's entire model is built on anonymous contributions from people around the world. You've got whistleblowers adding information about government corruption, people in authoritarian countries documenting human rights abuses, experts who might not want their employers knowing they're spending work hours editing articles about obscure mathematical theorems. The court acknowledged this as a problem. They literally said they need to protect Wikipedia, but then ruled against them anyway. It's like saying we recognize this medicine might kill the patient, but we're prescribing it anyway. The cognitive dissonance is remarkable. And here's where it gets even more ridiculous. Wikipedia basically has two options to avoid this. Either they implement identity verification and fundamentally break what makes Wikipedia work, or they'd have to cut UK access by 75%. Not 50%, not 60%, but specifically 3/4 of their UK traffic would need to go. Can you imagine? Sorry, 3 out of 4 of you can't look up that historical fact anymore because the government wants to know who's editing the article about the Battle of Hastings. The Hacker News discussion on this, with over 500 comments, is absolutely scathing. And I mean, people are mad.
The general consensus is that this isn't really about protecting children online, which is what the act claims to be about. Commenters are pointing out that this gives the government unprecedented control over information flow. One user, Leo, dug into something really interesting. They found that William Perrin, who was instrumental in creating this act and founded Ofcom, might have some concerning connections to companies that would profit from age verification requirements. Now, I haven't independently verified all these connections, but if true, it raises serious questions about who's really benefiting here. What's fascinating is the range of responses people are suggesting. A lot of folks think Wikipedia should just pull out of the UK entirely as a protest. Just gone. No more Wikipedia for Britain. Others are saying that's exactly what the government wants, less access to independent information sources. There's this interesting tension between making a statement and not punishing regular users who just want to look up information.
One commenter, Rosa, made a really compelling point, though. They argued that if Wikipedia pulls out, people won't just stop seeking that information. They'll go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever LLM they have access to. And then Wikipedia loses even more influence over the accuracy of information. It's kind of a no-win situation. There was also this technical discussion about alternatives. Someone suggested that instead of websites verifying age, why not verify at the device level, like when you buy a phone or a SIM card? It's still invasive, but at least it's one-time verification, instead of having to prove who you are to every single website. Though, honestly, the whole premise of age verification online is pretty flawed when any teenager can figure out a VPN in about 30 seconds. The broader context here is really troubling. The UK seems to be speedrunning the how to destroy the open internet playbook. You've got this act, you've got increased surveillance powers, you've got attempts to break encryption, and now they're going after one of the last truly open collaborative projects on the internet. What really gets me is the sheer mismatch between the problem they claim to be solving and the solution they're implementing. This is like using a sledgehammer to perform surgery. Wikipedia isn't Instagram, it's not TikTok, it's not a social media platform where kids are getting bullied or exposed to harmful content. It's an encyclopedia. But because the law was written so broadly, so carelessly, it catches everything in its net. The comment section also brought up how this could affect other open source projects. If Wikipedia falls under these regulations, what about GitHub? What about any platform where people collaborate? The precedent this sets is genuinely alarming for anyone who believes in the open internet. You know what's really ironic? The UK government probably relies on Wikipedia as much as anyone else. I guarantee you there are civil servants, MPs, researchers all using it daily. And now they're essentially forcing it to either compromise its core principles or reduce service. It's just such a perfect example of regulatory capture and unintended consequences. The judge in this case tried to thread the needle by saying regulators need to be careful with Wikipedia, but that's just words. The law is the law, and unless there's a specific carve-out for sites like Wikipedia, those reassurances mean nothing. It's like saying drive carefully while forcing someone to drive blindfolded.
Next up, let's talk about the Wikimedia Foundation challenging the UK's Online Safety Act regulations. And this one's a real head-scratcher, folks. So Wikipedia took the UK government to court over these new online safety rules. And while they technically lost the case, the judge basically said, yeah, you lost, but also the government better watch out or they're in trouble. It's honestly one of the strangest legal outcomes I've seen in tech regulation. Here's what happened. The Wikimedia Foundation argued that the UK's Online Safety Act could seriously harm Wikipedia and, more importantly, the thousands of volunteer contributors who make the whole thing work. And you know what? The High Court judge seemed to agree with their concerns, even while dismissing their challenge. The judge specifically warned that this ruling doesn't give Ofcom, that's the UK's communications regulator, or the government a green light to implement a regime that would significantly impede Wikipedia's operations. Think about that for a second. The court is essentially saying, these regulations are technically legal, but if you actually enforce them the way they're written, you might be breaking the law. It's like telling someone they can drive their car, but if they actually turn it on and drive it, they'll get arrested. The cognitive dissonance here is just wild. What makes this particularly interesting is that the judge acknowledged Wikipedia's significant value, which, yeah, no kidding, it's basically the internet's encyclopedia that we all rely on every single day. But more than that, the court recognized that wrongly categorizing Wikipedia under these safety regulations could actually harm the human rights of its contributors. We're talking about volunteers from around the world who dedicate their time to preserving and sharing knowledge, and suddenly they could be caught up in UK content moderation requirements that were really designed for social media platforms. The judge even suggested that Ofcom might need to find what they called a particularly flexible interpretation of the rules. Translation, the rules as written don't work for Wikipedia, so you're going to have to get creative. Or, and this is even better, Parliament might need to actually amend the rules themselves. So we have a law that just passed, and already the courts are saying, yeah, you might want to go back and fix this.
What we're really seeing here is the fundamental tension between these broad-brush online safety regulations and the reality of how different internet platforms actually work. The Online Safety Act was designed with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram in mind, places where user-generated content can spread misinformation, harmful material, all that stuff. But Wikipedia, it's a completely different beast. It's collaborative, it's heavily moderated by its own community, and has its own robust systems for dealing with bad content. And that's what makes this whole situation so frustrating. We've got regulations that are trying to solve real problems. Nobody wants harmful content spreading online, but they're written in such a way that they could accidentally destroy one of the most valuable public resources on the internet. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, except the nut is sitting on top of the Library of Alexandria. Now, what's really interesting is the community reaction on Hacker News. Despite this story getting over 600 points, the discussion thread is surprisingly sparse, only 3 comments visible. Looks like moderators might have consolidated or moved some of the discussion, which, honestly, given how heated these online regulation debates can get, I'm not entirely surprised. One commenter linked to reclaimthenet.org, which tends to frame these kinds of regulations as censorship, so you can see where some of the community concern is coming from. The bigger picture here is that we're watching governments around the world struggle to figure out how to regulate the internet without breaking the parts of it that actually work well. Wikipedia is probably the best example of successful internet collaboration we have. Millions of people working together to create a free, open repository of human knowledge. And now it's caught in the crossfire of regulations aimed at very different problems. What's particularly troubling is that this could have a chilling effect on Wikipedia contributors, especially those in the UK. If you're a volunteer editor, are you going to feel comfortable contributing if you know you might somehow run afoul of content regulations that weren't even designed with you in mind? It's adding a layer of legal uncertainty to what should be a straightforward act of sharing knowledge.
The judge's warning about potential legal repercussions if Wikipedia isn't protected is basically an admission that the system is broken. We have a law that's supposed to make the internet safer, but if enforced as written, it could damage one of the internet's most important educational resources. And the court's solution is essentially, well, just don't enforce it that way or you'll be in trouble. That's not how laws are supposed to work, folks. Laws should be clear, consistent, and applicable, not flexible depending on whether we like the platform or not. This whole situation really highlights the challenge of regulating global internet platforms with national laws. Wikipedia operates worldwide, with contributors from every country, maintaining information in hundreds of languages. How do you apply UK-specific content rules to that without creating a complete mess? Do UK residents get a different Wikipedia? Do global contributors have to follow UK rules, even if they're editing from, say, Brazil or Japan? The practical implications here are just staggering. And speaking of technology that's changing faster than regulations can keep up with, let's talk about AI coding assistants and why some developers are going all in while others are watching in horror. All right, switching gears here to something that's got the Hacker News crowd pretty fired up. Claude Code is all you need. This one's sitting at over 500 points with nearly 300 comments. And honestly, after digging into it, I can see why people have such strong reactions. So here's the deal. We've got a developer who's basically gone all in on Claude Code, this terminal-based AI assistant from Anthropic. And when I say all in, I mean they've jumped from paying $20 a month for ChatGPT to dropping $100 monthly on Anthropic's Max plan. That's a serious commitment to AI-assisted coding right there. What makes this interesting isn't just the price tag, though. This person has integrated Claude so deeply into their workflow that they're running it with, and I'm quoting here, dangerously skip permissions on their production servers. Yeah, you heard that right, production servers. The author even includes this warning in their post that basically says, if you work in InfoSec, stop reading now, which is bold, reckless, both. The security professionals in the comments are having an absolute meltdown about this. And honestly, I get it. One commenter literally said they'd rain down great vengeance and furious anger on anyone who tried this in their organization. Another security person just straight up said this would be grounds for immediate termination. And they're not wrong. Giving an AI agent full permissions to your production environment is it's like giving your house keys to someone you met on the internet who seems really helpful, but you've never actually met in person. But here's where it gets interesting. The author's reasoning for this setup actually makes some sense from a pure workflow perspective. They tried all the GUI-based alternatives, Cursor, CodeLine, Zed, and found them too clunky for their terminal and Vim-based workflow. Claude Code apparently just slots right into their existing setup seamlessly. They're using it to build all sorts of projects in autonomous startup builder, whatever that means, a splitwise replacement, an AI poster maker, even a browser plugin that rates Hacker News comments, which is pretty meta if you think about it. The discussion thread reveals this fascinating split in the community. On one side, you've got people who are genuinely excited about the productivity gains. They're building things faster, experimenting more, shipping projects they wouldn't have attempted before. But then there's this other camp that's watching in horror as fundamental skills seem to be evaporating. There's this hiring manager in the comments who shares something that should probably worry all of us. They interviewed 9 engineering candidates recently, and 7 of them couldn't write basic SQL queries without AI assistance. 7 out of 9. These aren't junior developers either. We're talking about people who should know this stuff cold. But they've become so dependent on AI that they're essentially doing what one commenter brilliantly called vibe coding, just kind of feeling their way through problems with AI holding their hand the entire time. And then there's the customer service angle that nobody's really talking about enough. Multiple people in the thread are reporting that despite paying premium prices, we're talking $100 a month here. Anthropic's support is basically non-existent. People getting ignored for weeks, rate limits getting more restrictive despite price increases. It's giving major move fast and break things, including customer relationships energy. One particularly spicy take in the comments suggests that the original article itself reads like it was written by AI and needed heavy human editing, which, if true, that's some serious irony right there. Here's someone evangelizing for AI coding assistance, potentially using AI to write about using AI. It's AI all the way down. Look, I think what we're seeing here is a microcosm of a much bigger conversation we need to be having. Yes, these tools are powerful. Yes, they can accelerate development in amazing ways. The author built 5 different projects in what sounds like record time. But at what cost? Are we creating a generation of developers who can ship fast but can't debug when the AI fails? Who can prototype quickly but can't optimize or secure their code properly? The production server thing, though, that's where I draw the line. I don't care how good your workflow integration is, running an AI with full permissions on production is it's like doing surgery with a chainsaw because it's faster than a scalpel. Sure, it might work, but when it goes wrong, it's going to go very, very wrong. What really strikes me about this whole discussion is how it highlights the growing divide between the move fast and ship crowd and the please, for the love of all that is holy, think about security and maintainability crowd. And honestly, we need both perspectives. We need the experimenters pushing boundaries, but we also need the voices of caution reminding us that some boundaries exist for really good reasons. And that's a wrap on yesterday's top stories from Hacker News. What a day, right? We started with Microsoft potentially destroying GitHub by shoving it into their AI division, watched developers abandon their fancy productivity apps for plain text files, saw the UK government somehow threaten Wikipedia with regulations meant for social media, and ended with the Wild West of AI coding assistants, where some developers are literally giving Claude the keys to their production servers. If there's a theme running through all of these stories, it's this tension between innovation and preservation, between moving fast and not breaking the things that actually work. Whether it's Microsoft chasing AI trends at the expense of GitHub's core mission, developers realizing that sometimes a text file beats a $100 app, or governments writing laws so broad they accidentally threaten encyclopedias, we're seeing what happens when we lose sight of why things work in the first place. The Hacker News community had over 2,000 comments across these 5 stories alone, and the passion in those discussions tells you everything about how much these issues matter to the people actually building and maintaining our digital infrastructure. Tomorrow, who knows what the front page will bring? Maybe someone will finally solve the tabs versus spaces debate. Probably not, though. Thanks for listening to the Hacker News Daily podcast. If you want to dive deeper into any of these stories, head over to news.ycombinator.com and join the discussion. Until next time, keep building, keep questioning, and maybe check if you have any AI agents running with production permissions. Just saying. This has been your daily dose of Hacker News. I'll see you tomorrow with another batch of stories from the front page of the internet. Stay curious, folks.